Thank you. It is with great honor that I rise today to co-anchor this Congressional Black Caucus Special Order 1 hour period along with my distinguished colleague from Oregon, Representative Bynum. For the next 60 minutes, members of the Congressional Black Caucus have an opportunity to speak directly to the American people about Black History Month, an issue of great importance not only to the Congressional Black Caucus, but to Congress, the constituents we represent, and to all Americans. It's a privilege to be able to stand here before you today. Black History Month is not just an opportunity to reflect on our past, but it is certainly an opportunity to uplift our present and renew the cause to fight for our future. I want to begin with a story because Black History Month is often thought of as a time to recognize those historical figures that we all know, the Martin Luther Kings of the world, the John Lewises of the world, and Rosa Parks and others. But Black History Month is about more than just those who are known. It's about a lot of those who are not known. And so I want to begin with the story of a few young men in the state of Alabama. In 1969, following what history has come to label as the end of the Civil Rights Movement in 1968, in 1969, four young men had been intentionally recruited to break down a color barrier at the University of Alabama's law school. And so 8 young men walked through the doors of University of Alabama's School of Law in the fall of 1969. Among them was a young man named John, a young man named Ronald, a young man named Booker T, and a young man named Michael. And these young men, when the Civil Rights Movement had ended, the struggles to realize the progress that America had made throughout the decade plus of fighting and protesting, this is what it was about. It was about leveling those playing fields and equaling the opportunity and access for people like these young men. And so they walked through the doors as the first African Americans to come into the University of Alabama's law school. And they would all ultimately become lawyers. John England, Booker T. Fort, Ronald Jackson, and Michael Figures. You know, Black history in America, it's a story of resilience and excellence and an unshakable pursuit of justice, an unshakable commitment to making this country be, as Martin Luther King would say, be true to what you said on paper for all of us. From the halls of Congress to the streets of our communities, Black leaders and educators and entrepreneurs and activists have shaped this nation. And yet we know that honoring this history isn't just about reflection, it's about action, because that's what we owe people. That's what we owe people. I come from Alabama, the birthplace of the Civil Rights Movement, a place when this nation and this world was experiencing injustices that we could not fathom today, a place where people, just based simply on the color of their skin, could not eat in certain places, work in certain places, be educated in certain places, live in certain places. Alabama, particularly Montgomery, Alabama, they stood up at a point when many cities and towns and people in those cities and towns across this country had a rightful fear of standing up in that way. Montgomery said no. So in 1955, when they launched a bus boycott, little did they know that they were giving rise to the greatest civil movement that the world has ever seen, that the world has ever known, led by a young minister who was a mere 26 years old at the time, Martin Luther King Jr. This movement will give rise to what America proudly holds itself out to be today, and that is that place of equal opportunity, that place of equal access, that place of equal justice. But this is a movement that was rooted in people who had a faith in a nation, that when history looks back, or when we look back at history rather, we wonder, how could they? How could people who come from such a history of segregation and degradation and slavery and Jim Crow, how could they remain steadfast in a commitment to a country? How could they have that love for a country that history had shown them did not love them in the same manner. But they held it because they knew that the greatness of America was really about what America could be and what it could be for them. Even if they came here in the bows of slave ships, even if they slaved as laborers in cotton fields, they knew that one day America could be better for them and could be better for their children and their grandchildren. That is what Black History Month is about. It is about recognizing the unwavering faith that people who had every reason not to have such faith maintained in this nation, and the contributions that they made to making America be true to what it said on paper. And so, it is understandable that when you have that understanding and that appreciation of where Black people in this country have come from, literally from the bottom, literally with nothing, literally as second and third and fourth class citizens and non-citizens initially. When you understand that when this building was built, people that looked like me, we could only be here for two reasons: to either build it or clean it or serve food. When you understand that when this country was formalized in a constitution, people who looked like me were not deemed to be an entire person. Barely just more than a half a person. Three-fifths of a person is what Black people were counted as. When you understand that, then you understand why many of us are very sensitive to efforts to attack things like diversity and efforts to attack things like equity and inclusion. Because we know that we come from a culture, we come from a people that had to deal with adversity, inequity, and purposeful exclusion for centuries. When all we wanted was a level playing field, when all we wanted was the same opportunities that you had. Never asked for special treatment, never wanted to be recognized in any way that you were not recognized. But they held on to that faith for this nation, and they led us to being a better place. And so when you come from that background, the several actions of this administration strike you a little bit differently. It stings a little bit more when you see things like an EEOC order that's been in place since 1962 that was meant to just make sure that people were not discriminated against is rolled back. It means something a little bit different when you see the administration hit a pause on funding to 1890 land-grant institution scholarships while not hitting pause on that funding to 1862 land-grant scholarships to those schools. It hits a little bit different when Auburn University, a predominantly white institution, is not impacted, but Alabama A&M University and Tuskegee University are impacted. One must ask, what is the difference between an 1862 school, a Texas A&M, an Auburn University, an LSU, and an 1890 school, an Alabama A&M, a Tuskegee? And when you look at the facts, it's the fact that the 1890s were historically Black colleges and universities. And so that stings a little bit different. It hits a little bit different when you understand the history of where people come from. That one of the first actions that we had to take after the administration came in was going to bat for making sure that the Tuskegee Airmen remained a part of the curriculum in training our nation's airmen. Something so basic, something so nonpartisan, something that we should all be able to agree on, that a group of men who went and put their lives on the line for a world, for a country, that when they returned home, they were still called the N-word. They were still forced to sit in the back of the bus. They were still told to take off their uniforms. They were still told that they were not good enough. They still could not send their kids to school in much of this country's public school systems. Yet because of a diversity, equity, and inclusion ban, we had to go to bat for them. And it wasn't just Democrats. There were Republicans, too, that saw that that was an issue that we should not have. Senator Katie Britt from my home state was there with us, but as was the Congressional Black Caucus and other members across this country. And so it is the attacks that we see on such things that hits a little bit different during Black History Month, because it is a failure to acknowledge the history. It's a failure to acknowledge a group of people who persevered through the worst of circumstances in this nation. A group of people who literally emerged from bondage. A group of people who emerged from torture, from rape, from kidnapping, from family separation. That's why it means so much to us. And that is why it is important that we recognize Black History Month, because contributions have been made by dozens of people, hundreds of people, thousands of people, millions of people who were not supposed to be in this country as citizens. But here we are, and here we stand. And although when this building was built, there were 0 members who looked like us, there now stand 62. And we know that we have an obligation to stand up and respect that history, because look, Black history is not just for me. It's not just my history. That young man named Michael Figures that walked into University of Alabama's law school, he would have a son. He would have 4 sons. One of them's name is Shomari Figures, and who stands before you today as a member of Congress because of the fights of him and the fights of those known and unknown before him. So Black history is not only my history. Black history is your history, whether you like it or not. It is our history. Black history is American history. Black history is who we are. And that is why we must continue the fight to make sure that we honor the contributions, the sacrifices that so many people have made, to make sure that we do not go back, to make sure that it is clearly understood that our efforts throughout the civil rights movement and since has only been to make sure we have a level playing field, has only been to make sure that I can't be excluded when I have the exact same qualifications as you. And so I stand here today as a proud son of a father and a mother who have both made Black history in their own right. I stand before you here today as the proud grandson of men who set the stage. Because most Black people in this country, they don't come from privilege. I consider myself to be blessed. Right? I think here in Congress we find ourselves a lot of times, we see a lot of people standing on, born on third base thinking they hit a triple. And that is the unfortunate realities of where we find ourselves. People forgetting where they came from. People forgetting what we went through. People forgetting how we got here in the first place. People forgetting the struggle. People forgetting what we overcame. People forgetting what we could not have and why we fight so hard for what we do have and to be able to maintain it in the future. Well, I don't forget. I won't forget. I cannot forget, because every day I walk in here is a reminder of what was sacrificed for me. Every day that I have the privilege of calling myself a United States citizen, a United States representative, is a reminder for me of what it took for myself and for people like me to be able to stand here. I know I was born on first base because my grandparents made sacrifices for my father to be able to step up to the plate and swing for the fences. And swing for the fences he did. Breaking down color barriers in his own right, gave his life to public service. Died one day at a dinner table. But what did not die with him was an appreciation, an understanding, a recognition of where we have been, what we have been through, how we got here, and what we must do to ensure that future generations enjoy the same opportunity.